if current trends continue, what are we going to look like in 20 years? And the name of the spoken word piece is One Day. So if you would, and I'm going to ask you to do this a few times today, center yourself. Typically that would involve closing your eyes, taking a few deep breaths in and let it out and just settle yourself, center yourself. Become 100% present. And I really encourage you to keep your eyes closed and focus on what you're hearing, to put all of your focus on what you're hearing. And one day.
It's time for a change. It's time for us to look at ourselves and look deep within and realize what is your purpose. It's time for you to remember back in the day when things were working well for you, your family, and your community. Our villages need a change. One day, families are going to sit at the dinner table and eat breakfast and dinner and pray. One day. One day, daddy's going to be the head of the household, not a name or a baby daddy on the outside looking in. Paying child support, having to knock for a visit, and not showing up for school plays or graduation. One day, baby brother and baby sister won't be sitting in the window or talking through prison walls or waiting for daddy to call because you promised me you would call, or you walked away after one day never to see me jump rope or play ball. Remember, you promised my mama you would come. One day. One day, mommy, one day. One day, mommy's not gonna leave her babies behind and run after the brother man, the crack man, the lover man, the beat your butt and put you on the corner man, the slap you down and say you ain't nothing man, and stop loving other women's husbands and take time for daddy and us. One day, mommy's gonna stay at home and cook and manage the books and greet her children with love and check the book bags and give me some consistency, some routine, show up for parent meetings and take care of my needs. One day, mommy will ask me how was my day and listen. Stop dressing like Little Kim and wanting to be in a soap opera or be in a BET video, but show up when I knock at the door and say, I love you. One day, my brother, one day. One day, brother will value education and love thyself and thy neighbor and stop killing Cain and Abel. Stop selling drugs on the corners to aunts and uncles and stop raping our sisters and talking back to your mamas. Disrespecting your babies, using profanity. Stop hating and trying to be like Mike or a PIMP or a rapper. And blaming the other man and go out and get a job and be somebody. One day. One day, my sisters, one day. One day, sister will say no more drama to being a baby's mama, to time to getting hairy and say, bury me first. One day, sister will stay in school and think it is cool to look at inner self and not reflect society's network. See, we're buying into Madonna's material world when we need to pick up a book and read Nikki Giovanni and learn your history. Tell that brother to stop calling her B and say, I'm a queen. One day. Communities, one day. One day our communities will strive, and our education system will drive our kids to be able to walk to school with pride. Our politicians will not just speak the word and live a lie. One day police brutality will die, and our penal system will rehabilitate our brothers, and they will self-educate themselves and the next brother. One day our grandmothers will be able to come back outside and sit on the porch with our mothers, and kids will run down the block and come back, and discipline the kids will be a village thing, and sisters will braid each other's hair. There'll be no more corner liquor store thugs, no drugstore corner hustlers, and no more Chinese and Iraqis taking our money, and we will have the power one day. And one day lack of self-respect and illiteracy and HIV and AIDS and TV media, babysitting and child abduction, terrorist attacks and carjacks and crack and child abuse and no self-worth and not giving back will be words that children will say, what's that? And I'm not finished yet. One day, stop the madness and we're living in hell won't be an understatement. Are you tired yet? I ask you, my people, when will one day be now? Why not now? Your time here on earth is not forever and you are not eternity. sorry. So stop saying, one day I'm gonna be a good child, or one day I'm gonna stop getting high, or I'm gonna use a condom, or better yet, I'm gonna stop having sex one day, or one day I'm gonna be a good mother or a good father and I'm gonna go visit my grandmother, or one day I'm gonna get on my knees and pray and get to know my God. My God, I got a message for you. My God wants you to stop saying one day and do it today, today, today.
Please continue to keep your eyes closed just for a moment and reflect on the question. What will the African American community be like in 20 years? If current trends are not addressed. And reflect on the question. Okay, whenever you're ready, please open your eyes. What will the African American community be like in 20 years? And Vicky, if current why don't we start with you? Are not addressed. Take, 45 seconds, no more than maybe a minute and a half. Just let it flow.
My one day has already began. My one day began the day my grandmother died, February the 17th of 2016. My one day began. I changed. Because of the 40 some odd years of that lady helping to raise me and me wanting to give her back to her changed me. Made me want to be better. Made me want to be a healer. To give her peace in the last days of her life. Gave me peace. Gave me strength to want to be able to go and touch somebody else. And love somebody else and make sure somebody else's family members. At the age she was of being 97 when she left her. She gave me a lot of encouragement to pursue my life's passion, to be a healer, and being a healer through massage therapy. My one day has started.
Great.
My life's passion.
20 years from now,
and being a healer through massage.
What do you think
Massage therapy.
The African American
My one
community,
day has started.
the African American community, what will we as a people be like in 20 years? 20 years from now, if things don't change. What do you think
If things don't change, we'll be non-existent.
You got the feeling you mean that literally.
I do.
Explain.
Non-existent. Chaos. Some real wild hours. A lot of things that happened to us, our ancestors in slavery, start doing to ourselves. That's what I think it would be like. Scary thought, knowing that I have 2 granddaughters and 5 grandsons. Very troubling. But at the same time, I'm convinced that I'm going to make a difference.
And one person can make a difference. This year alone, this 1 year, well more than 5,000 young black men are going to be killed by well more than 5,000 young black men this year alone. And it's almost like we're thrilled that it's only a lot more than 5,000 because, in the early 90s, it peaked at almost 10,000 a year. And we're talking dead. We're not talking, maimed, wounded, that sort of thing. Dead, taken off the planet. And I think we're fully aware of this carnage. But are we aware that more young African American males were killed in the last 15 years than U.S. service persons who died during the entire two-decade experience of the Vietnam War?
Wow.
That more will be lost this year, this 1 year, than the combined U.S. service persons lost during the entire, to this point anyway, Iraq and Afghanistan wars. I mean, there's cities that don't have 10,000 people. But yet things get a little worse. They get worse every day. And of course, we're to the point where little girls can be gunned down in their living rooms trying to do homework. Or somebody just being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, yeah, I understand you're questioning whether we'll even exist. And same question.
Restate the question if you would.
If current trends in the African American community are not addressed, what might we look like in 20 years, the African American community?
I can't presume to know. I cannot presume to know. But it's one of the reasons why I'm here. And I can assert ownership because I was living here when Ferguson happened. I drove through Clayton on the way to a friendly dinner with women friends and got lost and jig-jogged through alleys and saw men in black suits with those curly cues coming out of their ears. And I didn't know what it was. And clearly they were plainclothes policemen there because the court decision was about to come out. And then I traveled to the East Coast to be with my family by birth and watched on the television when the announcement was made. And I also could see the reaction when out of town, or when East Coast people would say, "Well, where are you from?" And I would say, unthinkingly, "I'm from St. Louis," and their faces would drop, and they would say, "Well, that's too bad." So I can't presume to know, but I'm here because I'd like to know, and I'd like to do what a Caucasian person can do.
Jesse?
20 years from now, me, myself, I hope it gets better. Because what's going on now, don't make no sense. Kids can't walk down the street without getting killed. You can't sit in your house and look at TV without somebody kicking your door in, coming in to rob you. It's all messed up. But in 20 years, I hope it gets better. I hope they turn around and open their eyes to reality and see the truth and actually wake up. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah. I feel you. It's very difficult to conceive of it getting worse. It really is. But yet it is getting worse. And it's been getting worse for a long time, for decades.
It's time for a change.
And, as human beings, we're adaptive creatures. We just adapt to the culture. But we don't have to. But we don't have to. Thank you for sharing. I want to tell you a story. True story. It's about the first time my wife and I went to Egypt. So I'm showing some age, okay? And we flew into Cairo, and Egypt was abuzz. Everybody was talking about the same thing. And I normally kill the name of this shop, but Egypt was about to get its first Benetton shop. Did I say it right, Ann?
I think so.
Benetton. And, you know, for those who may not know, it's an international clothing chain. And I'm like, we got a whole country. I'm sorry?
Pendleton or Billington?
Benetton, yeah. And I'm like, why is the whole country excited about getting a ding-dang retail shop, you know? But what was really freaking me out was where it was. They were opening this shop in Luxor. Now, you know, in Egypt, everything's along the Nile. And Luxor is about dang in the middle of what we think of as Egypt these days. And it was the temple city. It was the principal temple city of ancient Kemet, if you will, what they called themselves. And the reason why I found it so fascinating that it was opening in Luxor is because there might be 200 people that live in a 200 or 400 or even an 800-mile radius. It's an archaeological ruin. And if you ever go to Egypt, you know, yes, Cairo and Giza and the Great Pyramids and Cairo Museum and all that's wonderful. But make sure you take that cruise up the Nile. And that's how you visit Luxor. So those who visit Luxor come by boat, you know, river boats, probably 100 guests, you know, 50 staff. You sleep on the boat, you eat on the boat, you come off the boat and take tours. You know, the Valley of the Kings is on one side where they started burying pharaohs when, you know, they wanted to group them and be more protective. And on the other side of the Nile is the Valley of the Queens, and the temples are essentially on the Queen side. And, you know, you spend a full day there, and you're on to the next archaeological ruin as you cruise up. So it's like, why would somebody put a shop there? And my wife wanted to go. Yeah, we come home, what? But I wasn't worried because the typical Pendleton shop does not have many items. Very sparse on merchandise. I figured we'd be in there 20 minutes and out. And we got there, and she decided she had to touch every item in every size, in every color. And I was losing my mind. Totally losing my mind. Now, what I did tell you is Luxor is like the equivalent of 2 city blocks. I mean, just one street, extremely old buildings. And I said, well, you know, I'm out of here. You know, you'll find me. And I go out and I realize it's nothing. There's no place for me to go. There's nothing to do. I mean, you can't buy a postcard. You know, people aren't, you know, there for downtown Luxor. But I walked between 2 buildings, and there was a walkway, and they were like 2 steps down, do a hard right, and there was a door that was open, and it had a sign that said, welcome. That was it, just welcome. But it was in English, so like, cool. So I go in the shop, and the first thing that struck me is nobody acknowledged my presence at all. I mean, literally, it was almost like I was invisible. It was very long, but very narrow. Believe it or not, it seemed that the principal thing that they sold were hand-loomed wool rugs with scenes in them. You know, something I don't really associate with Egypt and deserts, you know, maybe India or whatever. And then in the far back, the walls were bare, and there was this cloth folded up on the floor in piles and quarters, about yay big, unfolded. And it's what I call, for lack of better terminology, an applique. You know, it was all hand-dyed, cut and sewn Egyptian cotton in some scene. And I'm the kind of person that I can't buy anything until I've seen everything. So I'm on my hands and knees, just folding, unfolding, refolding, literally probably 300 of these things. I eventually told my wife where I was. And they were horrible. I mean, it was like 8-year-old or 12-year-olds. This must have been the stuff they practiced on, But I found a couple that I would buy. And I pushed myself up off the ground, and I kind of moved up, and I kind of looked like, is anybody ever going to acknowledge my presence? I mean, can't you see? I want to know how much this stuff costs, right? And you know how sometimes you can tell somebody's laughing at you? The whole time I was doing this, it was this old guy back here, just cruddy yellow teeth, you could scrape crud off. And he had, big water pipe. And I think he found me quite amusing. And when I looked around, he said, "I like your taste. Would you like to see more?" And I'm like, dude, have you not seen me look at everything you have? But, I'm not going to be the ugly American. So I said, sure. And he got up kind of creaky and turned around, and he literally pushed the wall, and it opened. And 6 people started scurrying around. This may sound sexist because it is, but 2 women sat us at this luxurious living room almost setting and came in with tea and cookies, and 2 sets of 2 men each started bringing in the real deal. And they had like a whole wall that almost had like a carpet tack board surface. And 2 would put it up, and he gave them some kind of signal, I don't know what. And they take it down, and immediately the other 2 guys would put another one up. And I fell in love. I absolutely fell in love. And now my wife had the problem because I negotiated with this guy for over 2 hours on this one piece. Because I hadn't planned on buying anything in Luxor. I didn't plan on buying art on this trip at all, to be perfectly honest. And I had a limited amount of money. I mean, I know I'm showing my age, but, when you did international travel in those days, you took American Express travel checks, your traveler's checks. They didn't recognize credit cards all over the world. So I can't spend all my money in one place. And I tried, and I tried, and I tried, and I didn't get 1 penny of discount. Now, he gave me the 2 smaller pieces there, and he gave me another piece, fairly large, not as much detail. He said, it's not a machine stitch anywhere, right down to the fingernails and the toenails. And I want to show it to you now. Now, I love the craftsmanship. But what I'm really in love with is the whole idea of the central character. The central character is Mayat, M-A-A-T. And Mayat was really central and integral to Kemetic culture. We know at least 5,000, going back at least 5,000 years. And she represented all things good and wonderful and in balance in the universe. Often she was referred to literally as God's emissary. And there were 42, they go by different names. Some people call them negative confessions. Some people call them admonitions. I just call them character traits. But the idea was to live your life in such a way that when you died and you went to your weighing of the heart ceremony, where literally there's a human-sized scale, scale of justice, if you will. And on one balance is the feather of Mayat. You will see other images of kneeling women from, temple walls and so forth in Kemet. But if they have an ostrich feather in their headband, it's Mayat. No ostrich feather, not Mayat. So on one side of the scale is the feather of Mayat, think extremely light. And on the other part of the scale is your heart. I mean, literally your heart. And the idea was if you had lived a life consistent with Mayat, then your heart would be as light as the feather of Ma'at, and you would go on to this wonderful afterlife. Now, it never became clear to me what happened if you didn't meet that test, but there was always this dog-like creature sitting at the at the foot of the scale, so, whatever. Now, what I want to do is I want to share with you some of those admonitions, some of those negative confessions, if you will, because they blow me away. And what I want you to keep in mind is this is a culture where everybody's on exactly the same page. Everybody's trying to become more godlike, if you will, by perfecting themselves along these 42, I call them character traits, living in such a way so that when they passed on, they could say 42 times, not have I, not have I, not have I, not have I. And the first one is, not have I committed sin. I'm like, dang, don't that cover it all? And it's just getting warmed up. Now, most people think that they find the 10 Commandments in here. I've not committed robbery. I've not stolen. I've not slain. I've not swindled. I've not told lies. It starts getting interesting at 10. And I would have failed this one miserably. I have not cursed. 11, I have not closed my ears to truth. I love that one. I've not closed my ears to truth. Not committed adultery. Not made anyone cry. I've not felt sorrow without reason. Not assaulted anyone. Not been deceitful. Not been an eavesdropper. 19, I have not falsely accused anyone. 20, I've not been angry without reason. Can you imagine what the society must have been like, where everybody's trying to live up to this standard? Yes, this is a translation, from probably 40, 50 years ago. But 22 and 23, words were translated that are very, I think, new to today. I've not polluted myself. Not polluted myself. I've not terrorized anyone. That's 23. Not disobeyed the law. Not been excessively angry. Not behaved with violence. Not caused disruption of peace. Not acted hastily or without thought. Not overstepped my boundaries of concern. Not exaggerated my words when speaking. Not worked evil thoughts, words, or deeds. Not spoken angrily or arrogantly. Do you get it? What a society that must have been. And guess what? It was. It was. Now, in those days, you didn't go that far and just fly back home, So we left Cairo and we flew to Rome. And, of course, we went to Circus, another serious archaeological site in the world. And, of course, that's where the Christians were martyrized. And in the center of the infield, there's only one thing. And it's right dab in the center of the infield. It is an obelisk that they ripped off from Egypt, stone by stone. Disassembled, put on vote, transported to Rome, reassembled. As a tribute to all that the Romans received from Kemetic culture. In every aspect you can think of. Math, science, government, culture. Over the world, and particularly in Egypt, the contribution of these Africans is universally known, recognized, understood, and appreciated. And I'm like, whoa, cool. So we get on a plane, and we fly to Paris. And, Eiffel Tower, that's new stuff, But I always envision the Arc de Triomphe as a defining image, in Paris. And, it's in the center of that roundabout, and I always assumed it was in the middle of the main drag. Oh, it's on the main drag, but it's not in the center. It's at one end of the main drag. And at the other end of that same street is another roundabout. And in the center of it, ripped off from Egypt, stone by stone, is another obelisk that the French have in such an honored position as tribute to all that French culture received from ancient Kemet. And this, I swear this is true. My wife and I got on a plane in Paris to fly back to the States. I don't even remember where we flew back into. And I know I'm showing my age, but in those days, they gave you free magazines to read while you were on the plane. And that week, on the cover of Newsweek, was that 3rd century AD bust of that Caucasian woman that we often associate with Cleopatra. And the cut line on the cover of Newsweek that week was, quote, "Was Cleopatra black?" And every European on that plane was cracking up. They were like, those Americans, they so silly. They use these oceans, to create an alternative reality that only makes sense to them. Of course Cleopatra was black, and that ain't her. And when America was founded, our founding fathers, if you will, and mothers, had so much respect for Kemetic culture that being unable to rip off an obelisk from Egypt or Kemet anymore, we built the biggest obelisk on the planet and called it the Washington Monument. And to this day, we have Egyptian imagery all over our money, our paper money. But yet we've been led to believe that nothing good or wonderful has ever come off the continent of Africa. In fact, when you go in the Cairo Museum, right in the main door, kind of like a greeting hall, in the middle of it is a column that has a bust of Zoser on it. Zoser, the most African-looking dude you ever seen in your entire life. And Zoser was a bad dude. He built the step pyramid at Saqqara, which some people believe to be the first pyramid ever built. Akhenaten was his vicar. And in Germany, because a lot of Egyptian artifacts are in Europe these days, there's a bust that's universally recognized as Cleopatra's mama. And she, of course, her features are African. And if you ask the Egyptians, where did you come from? They say from the south. And when you question them about that, they mean that area that we know today as Ethiopia and the southern Sudan. Okay, so why have I told you this whole story? Why have I shared Mayat with you? Because culture can be completely conscious. In Kemetic culture, that culture had been very carefully defined. It had been communicated to everyone. Everyone was on the exact same page, trying to live up to this incredibly high standard of human behavior. Culture was used to create greatness. And then there can be cultures that are hardly aware that culture even exists at all. And maybe I'm wrong, but I believe that African American culture is on that other end of the perspective. We don't wake up every morning and say, hey, let's kill 5,000 brothers this year. We don't wake up and say, oh, let's verbally and physically abuse one another. We don't wake up every morning and say, oh, I want my kid to graduate with an 8th grade education. But we have to remember that for centuries, we lived the enslaved in America. And part of that process is you had no control of your destiny whatsoever. And you had very little opportunity to define a culture, much less to execute a culture of your choice. So as you know, we're going to be drilling down on the topic of culture. And examine whether it's time for the African American community to finally heal.